It was a rainy Thursday evening in Charleston, South Carolina, the kind where the streets glisten under street lamps and everything smells like wet earth and sea breeze. The kind of night that makes people nostalgic, and for Carl Emerson, it had become a habit to sit on his porch with a worn-out fleece blanket, a mug of chamomile tea, and a head full of memories. Carl was 72 and had been widowed for 6 years. His wife, Martha, had passed after a quiet battle with cancer. Since then, the days moved slow, and the nights slower. Carl spent most of his time gardening, reading historical novels, and meeting his childhood friend, Harold Mitchell, at a nearby diner. Harold, 2 years older and equally retired, had a louder laugh and a larger collection of bad jokes. And somehow, that combination always seemed to keep Carl anchored. On that particular Thursday, Carl received a call from Harold just before sundown. "Hey Carl, I'm heading your way. Grab a coat. You and I aren't growing any younger, and I feel like doing something wild tonight." Carl laughed, nearly choking on his tea. "Wild? Harold, the wildest thing we've done lately is order extra syrup on pancakes." "Exactly. We're overdue." Carl sighed, amused and intrigued. "All right, what's the plan?" Harold wouldn't say. "You'll see. Just be ready in 20. When Harold pulled up, his ancient Ford truck was glistening with rain, wipers struggling. Carl stepped in with a skeptical grin. "If this ends in jail, I'm telling the officers it was all your idea." Harold winked. "They'll probably thank us for adding excitement to their shift." The drive was filled with stories and laughter, like all of their conversations. They passed the familiar roads of their youth, now lined with fast food chains and pharmacies. They were heading out of town toward Sullivan's Island, but Carl still had no idea what Harold was planning. When they finally arrived at the beach parking lot, the rain had turned into a light mist. Harold got out and opened the truck bed, revealing a cooler, 2 folding chairs, a Bluetooth speaker, and a bag of marshmallows. Carl raised an eyebrow. "We drove out in the rain to roast marshmallows?" "Not just roast. We're gonna make esmores, dance to old records, and talk about the dumbest things we've ever done. Tonight's about living a little." The beach was deserted. The storm had driven most people away, and the wind had settled into a soft breeze. They set up near a lifeguard stand, under the cover of a tree just enough to stay mostly dry. The Bluetooth speaker started playing classic soul music, Sam Cooke, Otis Redding, The Temptations. Carl was reluctant at first, but as they danced, badly and off-beat, he couldn't stop laughing. It was the kind of laughter that bubbles up from a place you forgot existed. They toasted with root beer, made lopsided esmores, and shouted their favorite lyrics into the night. Eventually, they sank into their chairs, watching the waves roll under the moonlight. "Do you ever think about what it means to get older?" Harold asked, staring ahead. Carl nodded slowly. "Every day. There's this pressure, like you're supposed to slow down. Be quiet. Fade away. But I still feel like I've got something left in the tank." Harold smiled. "That's why we're here. Because we're not done yet." Carl looked at his friend with a warm, reflective gaze. "You ever regret not doing something?" "Plenty. But the bigger regrets are always the things I was too afraid to try. You know, I almost joined a blues band when I was 30. Talked myself out of it." "You would have been amazing," Carl said sincerely. "Maybe," Harold chuckled. "But tonight feels like I made up for it, just a little." There was something about the openness of the beach, the dim glow of the overcast sky, and the simplicity of 2 lifelong friends sharing the kind of night people write songs about. It wasn't loud or flashy, but it was wild in its own way. When the rain picked up again, they packed up and sat in the truck, heater blasting, windows fogging. "I've been thinking," Carl said, his tone quieter now. "We should do a road trip. Just like the old days. Arizona, New Mexico. All the places we talked about but never visited." Harold leaned back. "Why not? Let's make it a bucket list road trip." They spent the next hour in the truck, scribbling plans on napkins. The Grand Canyon, Route 66, a jazz club in New Orleans, a cowboy museum in Oklahoma. The list kept growing. As they drove back toward Charleston, it was nearly 3 a.m. The roads were empty, save for the occasional headlights flashing past. Carl turned toward Harold. "You know what I loved most about tonight?" "What?" "That we didn't need anything fancy. No expensive restaurants or crowded parties. Just the beach, some tunes, and a little courage to be goofy." Harold laughed. "Sometimes, a wild night just means remembering who you really are." They pulled into Carl's driveway, the porch light still on, flickering slightly in the wind. Carl didn't get out right away. "Thanks for dragging me out tonight. I haven't felt this alive in years." Harold patted his shoulder. "No regrets, my friend. Not a single one." They hugged like brothers and promised to start their road trip planning that weekend. Carl watched Harold drive off into the dark before heading inside, heart full, smile wide. The next morning, Carl opened his laptop and began writing. He had once dreamed of being an author but had always put it off. Inspired by the previous night, he started typing, 2 older men, 1 wild night, and 0 regrets. Weeks passed, and their road trip began. They drove west in Harold's old truck, with Carl's newly adopted mutt, Rusty, in the back seat. They met strangers who became friends, tasted food they couldn't pronounce, and sang along to music they hadn't heard since high school. They posted pictures online, Harold with a cowboy hat too big for his head, Carl standing in front of a canyon edge, both of them grinning like teenagers. Their story began to spread. People started commenting on how inspiring their journey was, how it reminded them that it's never too late to chase joy. By the time they reached the California coast, Carl's story had become a short memoir, and a small publisher reached out. Carl, humbled and still surprised, accepted the offer. He dedicated the book to Harold with the note, "To the man who reminded me how to live." Back in Charleston, when they finally returned, their small diner had a new framed photo hanging by the counter. 2 older men holding root beers, standing by a beach fire, faces lit with laughter and peace. Carl and Harold became local legends, not for doing something outrageous, but for doing something true. Their wild night had no fireworks, no flashing lights. But it had heart, friendship, and the courage to step outside comfort. Years later, when asked about that night on the beach, Carl would smile and say, "It wasn't about what we did. It was about what we remembered, that life is still happening, no matter your age." And he meant it. With 0 regrets.